Tonight on The Wrap, the Prime Minister reiterates calls for Andrew to testify about Jeffrey Epstein in the US Congress. The former prince is under renewed pressure as new photos from the Epstein files appear to show him crouching over a woman lying on the floor.
I must assert my Fifth Amendment, Sixth Amendment, and 14th Amendment rights as provided by the US Constitution.
Also amongst the latest material, thousands of videos, including one showing Epstein being questioned by prosecutors in 2010. Explosions add to jitters in Iran, even as an official says progress is being made toward talks with the US. An attack on them is an attack on all. Black British journalists and public figures denounce the arrests of former news anchor Don Lemon and a reporter at a Minnesota protest. A champion's performance. Liverpool come from a goal down to beat Newcastle 4-1 at Anfield. We discuss the day's biggest stories with John Sweeney and Annabelle Denham. Plus, a first look at the front pages of Sunday's newspapers, including reported warnings to Andrew that more damaging photos will come out. Good evening. Sir Keir Starmer has suggested that the former Prince Andrew should be prepared to testify before the US Congress about his links to Jeffrey Epstein. Andrew has featured in the huge new disclosure of Epstein files released by the US Justice Department. John Sweeney and Annabelle Denham are here with me tonight to take us through their thoughts on all of the stories in the papers and elsewhere. John?
I don't think they should be called the Epstein files. It's not good enough. It's the Epstein sewer. And it's going to take a long time and a lot of very hard work before the stink goes away. It's here for years.
Annabelle?
I'm worried that Keir Starmer is backing himself once again into a corner here, because if he is suggesting that Andrew needs to testify, will he also expect Peter Mandelson, who he appointed as the ambassador to the US, to testify as well? But really the line that stands out for me is that there is much more to come, and much of it will be worse. OK, well, more from you both in a moment. But Sky News is combing through millions of pages of documents and thousands of videos and photos, which are revealing more about the late sex offender's ties with the wealthy and powerful. Let's begin with our data and forensics correspondent, Tom Cheshire.
The latest release of millions of files is helping us build the fullest picture so far of Jeffrey Epstein's wretched life. High society, sordid crimes and the consequences of them. Among them are these new images of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. They show him on all fours. In two of the pictures, he appears to be touching a woman's stomach, while the others show him looking straight at the camera. The photos appear without explanation, date or further context, and there's no suggestion of any wrongdoing. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor has always denied any allegations against him. But these files aren't just about lurid photos or ill-advised friendships. They document in precise detail exactly what Epstein did. One document here shows a list of some of the witnesses. It looks dry and methodical until you see the ages, 17 years old, for all these victims. At high school, these were school children, and they were abused hundreds of times. Other victims described being raped and beaten in graphic detail. Victims' journals are also included in the files. One victim took this pre-branded title, Flights of Fancy, and altered it, so it read Flights and Yachts of Horror. Those are just some of the shocking crimes that would form part of the later investigation. And the documents also include an interview with Ghislaine Maxwell.
Did you ever give a massage to anyone other than Mr. Epstein at any of Mr. Epstein's properties?
First of all, I never said I gave Mr. Epstein a massage.
I'll ask that question if you want, but I was focusing on people other than Mr. Epstein right now.
I didn't give massages.
Okay.
Prosecutors did repeatedly try to uncover the full truth of Epstein's crimes. The newest files contain a deposition of Epstein from 2010, part of a civil lawsuit.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Can you give us your name?
Jeffrey Epstein.
He invoked US constitutional amendments to refuse to answer questions.
How did you meet Ghislaine Maxwell?
I intend to respond to all relevant questions to this lawsuit. However, at the present time, my attorneys have counseled me that I cannot provide answers to any questions relevant to this lawsuit and must accept this advice or risk losing my right to effective representation. Accordingly, therefore, I assert my 5th, 6th, and 14th Amendment right to the U.S. Constitution.
That investigation would eventually lead Jeffrey Epstein here, to this cell in 2019. This is where he killed himself, a month or so after his arrest. Up until his arrest, though, Epstein continued his high society life, and there's lots of famous names in these latest documents. Now, just being mentioned doesn't imply any wrongdoing. One of those names is the world's richest man, Elon Musk. He's always denied any close relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, but they exchanged numerous emails trying to arrange a visit for Musk to Epstein's island in the Caribbean. In one of them, Musk goes on to write this: "What day, night will be the wildest party on your island?" Now, Musk has addressed those allegations directly on X. He wrote, "No one pushed harder than me to have the Epstein files released, and I'm glad that has finally happened. I had very little correspondence with Epstein and declined repeated invitations to go to his island or fly on his Lolita Express, but was well aware that some email correspondence with him could be misinterpreted and used by detractors to smear my name. I don't care about that, but what I do care about is that we at least attempt to prosecute those who committed serious crimes with Epstein, especially regarding heinous exploitation of underage girls." So this is the fullest picture we have, but only so far. We've been through thousands of documents. There are millions more still to look through and plenty more still to come out.
And that is the thought to hang on to. There's plenty more still to come out. And we hear from the Democratic Party Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez calling for the complete files to be released, which is what the law requires, John.
Yeah, so you've got to have a bit of a warning here. Any investigation by the FBI, by the Met here in London, even by us simple old journalists, you come across a story and you think it's shocking, and then you go to work and you try and check it out, and some of the time you're looking at a fantasy or a fantasist. And this happened here in Britain with this guy, Nick, who was a fantasist. But at the time, the police, they went into a big probe into Lord Bramwell, the former Chief of the Defence Staff, and Leon Britton, a great Conservative cabinet minister, and made their lives hell, and it was all based on nonsense. So that can happen. So to be fair to these people, you've got to keep remembering that we have the presumption of innocence. At the same time, for example, the picture of Andrew with this woman, but she's very, very slight. She could be a child. It's hard to tell. Her face is blacked over, and we don't know the context. But the photograph alone is horrible.
And that's the point, Annabelle, isn't it? We don't know the context of all of these communications, emails, these photos, videos also. And we have to say that anybody who's named in these files is not accused of any wrongdoing. And, you know, we can't attribute any guilt to anyone, even if they're named in the file.
No, and Andrew, in particular, has stressed repeatedly that he hasn't done any wrongdoing. But even if you were to give the most generous interpretation, you'd say that he's displayed the most dreadful misjudgment. How is it that the future king's brother has found himself being photographed like this? I mean, it certainly hints at total debauchery, even if there's no illegal activity taking place, even if he hasn't committed any crime. And you know, Buckingham Palace must be having a fit at the moment, because they will have thought that this very drastic action that the King took last year when he removed all of the baubles from Andrew, stripped him of his titles, evicted him from Royal Lodge, I don't think has yet taken effect, but he will be moving to Norfolk. And yet still there are these demands for him to face questioning under oath, for him to go to America and testify. And I just wonder if they're going to feel at some point they need to buckle under the pressure. But to do so would be even further embarrassment for the monarchy.
Well, let's take a look now at remarks by the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, repeating calls for Andrew Mountbatten Windsor to testify before the US Congress, as you were saying. He was asked about the former Prince and sacked UK Ambassador Peter Mandelson during his final leg of his Asia trip. Well, he told journalists that Epstein's victims have to be the first priority. As for whether there should be an apology, that's a matter for Andrew. I've always said anybody who has got information should be prepared to share that information in whatever form they're asked to do that. You can't be victim-centred if you're not prepared to do that. As for Peter Mandelson, obviously he was removed as ambassador in relation to the further information that came to light in September of last year. I've nothing more to say about Peter Mandelson. Well, let's bring in our chief political correspondent now, John Cray. And John, is this the furthest that the Prime Minister has gone in terms of suggesting that Andrew should testify before US Congress?
Well, the key sentence there is where the Prime Minister says you can't be victim-centred if you're not prepared to do that, give evidence. So the Prime Minister is suggesting there that Andrew would be failing the victims if he didn't agree to testify. Now, he was asked, first of all, do you think it's time for Andrew to apologise to the victims? His answer to that was, well, that's a matter for Andrew. Now, just over a week ago, when President Trump made that dreadful slur about British troops in Afghanistan, when the Prime Minister was asked, should he apologise, the PM said, well, if it was me, I would apologise. So he stopped short of that, but perhaps he might say that in the future. Then the second question was, is it time for him to testify about what he knew? And that's when he said, as he said, as to whether he said, in terms of testifying, I've always said anyone who's got information should be prepared to share that information. But it's that new sentence where he says you can't be victim-centred if you're not prepared to do that. This will increase the pressure on what former Prince Andrew, now Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. The fact that the British Prime Minister is calling on him to do that will no doubt lead to the calls from American lawyers acting on behalf of the victims, and also political pressure from here in the UK, because there are plenty of opposition politicians. I'm thinking particularly of Sir Ed Davey, who's raised this in the Commons at Prime Minister's questions and on other occasions. So the Prime Minister really is piling on the pressure on Andrew here, so as he would probably see it, to do the decent thing and tell the American authorities, Congress probably, what he knows. As for the former Prince Andrew, well, I guess he'd have to be dragged kicking and screaming to appear before Congress. It would take probably some sort of legal subpoena, some sort of legal move to compel him to appear for him to do that. He will not want to do that. And of course, there is always the possibility of more humiliating evidence or photographs to come, which of course will increase the pressure even more on the former Prince, now simply Andrew Mountbatten Windsor.
Indeed, John, thank you very much for the moment. Well, Peter Mandelson, Lord Mandelson, also mentioned. And so far, our data and forensics team have reviewed over 30,000 images from the latest Justice Department tranche. They include an image appearing to show Peter Mandelson. They purport to show Peter Mandelson in his underwear and a T-shirt standing next to a woman in a bathrobe. We don't know when, where or by whom the pictures were taken. And a reminder, being photographed in the Epstein files does not indicate any wrongdoing. Well, Lord Mandelson has given us this statement tonight in which he says no one can say who or where the photo was taken. I've absolutely no idea or indeed whether it has any connection to Epstein. So back to John and Annabelle. Various other information came out in relation to Peter Mandelson, Lord Mandelson, least of which the suggestion that he was being lobbied by Epstein to change government policy on bonuses for bankers.
Yeah, no, I thought that statement by Peter Mandelson was a bit rubbish, frankly. I did a podcast about this called Hunting Glenn, which turned into a book, same name. And at one point, I got a hold of the Epstein kind of address book. And one of the people in it was Peter Mandelson. And I phoned him up and I said, hello, Peter. Can you talk to me about your relationship with Epstein? He said, oh, yeah, I'm terribly sorry, I'm on a Zoom call. I'll phone you back immediately. And he never did.
Surprise, surprise.
And that response was, I mean, it's full of mush. but what's the substance? And, you know, the detail of this is that Mandelson's husband was given $10,000 by Epstein after Epstein had been convicted of being a paedophile. Now, there's a lot of stuff, and obviously your lawyers will be saying that's no evidence of wrongdoing. And I've got to look at that phrase, and I think, well, actually, morally, maybe not legally, but morally, it's wrong to take money from a convicted paedophile. It just is, and it benefited, you know, the Mandelsons as a couple, and that just feels wrong. Mandelson's a wealthy man. He lives in a fancy place in Regent's Park. He doesn't need this. He never needed this money. What's going on? And the next question, and maybe people on the Telegraph, Annabelle, don't know the answer, but the next question is, what did Epstein get in return? Because Epstein's, you know, he was a massive manipulator and cunning and mercenary. So he gives $10,000 to Mandelson's husband. What does Epstein get for that? There are a lot of questions, and it feels to me that politically what Starmer's doing is, oh, Andrew, you should go and give evidence. Yes, he's right about that. But also Starmer's got questions. Why on earth did he appoint Mandelson ambassador? Because we all knew, even before this latest release of files, we all knew that, that Mandelson had been pally with Epstein after he'd been convicted of being a paedophile. So it was a mistake to make the #1 diplomat in the country for Washington, D.C. Big mistake.
Annabelle, your thoughts on whether this increases the pressure on Lord Mandelson to testify before US Congress?
I think that Keir Starmer, those words are going to come back to haunt him, aren't they? How can you call for Andrew to go to the US and testify and not expect Peter Mandelson to do the same? And there will be backlash on him, even if the primary focus is on the former ambassador to the US. So I think this is going to turn out to be deeply uncomfortable for the Prime Minister, and it will serve as a reminder that he stood up in September at PMQs and defended Peter Mandelson and said that he had his full confidence, and the very next day he sacked him. And it just looked very much as though he'd been pushed into making a decision that he didn't want to, and had he been given the
choice,
he
said that was before he had the
full information, but I think that's subsequently been disputed. It does look like a poor choice by the Prime Minister to appoint Peter Mandelson to begin with. You could see the temptation to do so. He is a figure who not only has, well, maybe not 9 lives, but 3 lives, but he's quite an emollient character. He'd be able to be quite obsequious towards the Trump administration at a time when Keir Starmer has somebody in the White House with whom he definitely doesn't see eye to eye, despite the fact that he has been able to nurture and cultivate quite a good relationship with the US president. So you could see the attraction of appointing Peter Mandelson into that role, but how they didn't foresee that this Epstein scandal was going to roll on and on and on with a growing number of figures, key prominent figures being pulled into it. I just don't know. Now, Peter Mandelson just a few weeks ago said that as a gay man, he wasn't exposed to and didn't see...
That's rubbish.
And well, that has been, I think, the response of the general public was that he was leaning on that, and he is an extremely sharp, intelligent individual, and how could he not have seen what was going on?
OK. Let's turn to Iran now, where 2 blasts today occurred at a time of soaring tensions that have been blamed on gas leaks. Now, one explosion in the southern port of Bandar Abbas ripped the front off a block of flats, killing a 4-year-old girl and injuring 14 people. The other blast, more than 600 miles away in Avaz, killed 4 people. Well, the blast highlighted the jittery mood inside Iran as its clerical rulers face off with the US president. President Trump, having deployed what he calls an armada in the region, is considering potential strikes. Tonight, though, there are suggestions from the Iranian side of more dialogue. Iranian security official Ali Larijani posted this on X. Contrary to the hype of the contrived media war, structural arrangements for negotiations are progressing. Well, our international correspondent Alex Rossi is in Erbil in the north of neighbouring Iraq. He looks at the likelihood that gas explosions are to blame today, given everything that's going on.
I think it's very difficult to say, but I think you have to take it at face value at the moment, because there isn't really any other information. The Iranian authorities are saying that they are gas explosions. But people are watching this very, very closely, especially in somewhere like Bandar Abbas, which is on the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most important maritime choke points in the world. 20% of the world's oil goes through there, 20% of the world's liquefied natural gas. So, you know, it can move markets. People look at it really, really closely at any time. But when you also factor in at the moment what's happening in terms of this American armada, this display of mass naval force moving into the region, about 30,000 to 40,000 US personnel there, carrier strike group, jets, you know, a significant show of power, people start to speculate. And it may very well be that they're not connecting the dots correctly, but, you know, that this region is on, you know, on tenterhooks trying to guess what Donald Trump will do next. Now, I think that show of force we're seeing fits into the pattern we've seen before. It is a classic case of gunboat diplomacy. We saw the same thing with Nicolas Maduro before he was snatched in Venezuela. And ultimately, the Trump administration is saying to the Iranians, negotiate when it comes to your nuclear program, change your behaviors, or else. That's the kind of gunboat diplomacy bit. We've heard from the Iranians, they're saying that they won't be coerced, and they are accusing the Americans of destabilizing the country and fomenting protests inside the country, but clearly an extremely nervous time across the region.
Well, local media saying both incidents were gas explosions, and Israel has denied any involvement. Do you have suspicions, John?
Magba America, Magba Anglia, Farsi for death to America, death to England. It's the Ayatollah's big hits, and that's what we heard when I was there in Tehran, 92. Iran is a beautiful country led by horrific monsters. There is no democracy. Journalists like us, we're going to end up dead, locked up in prison forever. So there's no way of checking. But certainly the damage in Bandar Abbas, where I was there, I think in 91, it looked pretty big, but we don't know. But I think that Trump has lost his moment. There was an uprising against the Ayatollahs, and it was really, really getting some momentum. And then using Chinese facial recognition cameras, the secret police and the murderers got in. There were reports of thousands of protesters being killed. A high number is 30,000, but it's all simmered down, it's gone down. So it feels like that Trump should have done this much earlier, back the early part of January, and it's now too late to radically change things. Also, there was a kind of weird, it's hard to know what Netanyahu and Israel's up to, but the kind of mood music was you don't want to go in heavy until you've got the kit there. And so what the Americans have done, they've moved their great big aircraft carriers, but it feels like the moment's gone.
Annabelle, do you think that Trump's moment has passed? He is saying that a substantial armada is on its way to Iran and threats of some sort of strike.
Well, I think many Iranian people who have been involved in these protests are appalled at the fact that weeks ago Donald Trump said the cavalry are coming and you will have our support, and it never arrived. And many would believe that the US president has blood on his hands as a result of promising the cavalry who didn't come. Now, yes, they have moved US warships to the area, but these are defensive vessels, and the tightrope that America is now having to walk is between Benjamin Netanyahu on the one hand, who would like to see the destruction of Iran, which has wrought so much misery and caused so much turmoil in the region, and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia, in addition to some other Gulf states, Qatar and the UAE, who are urging the US to display restraint and do not want them launching missiles over to Iran from their territory. So my feeling, to echo John's thoughts really, is that this latest uprising, sadly, democracy is going to fizzle out, and, you know, what a terrible tragedy that is, because it is such a brutal, oppressive regime that has absolutely no regard whatsoever for human rights.
Just very quickly from both of you, do you think Donald Trump's intentions are towards regime change or not?
I think he's on the side of dictators.
Annabelle?
I doubt that he would be able to sell it to the American people. You know, Western intervention in the Middle East and foreign wars and regime change has not ended particularly well. And let's not forget that Donald Trump has been insistent that he was able to stop the nuclear program in Iran. So how would that be sold as an America First national foreign policy?
OK, let's move on, sort of an American story, but in relation to how it pertains to Britain. Prominent black British public figures, including Sir Lenny Henry, have put their names to an open letter condemning the arrests of journalists in the US. The former CNN news anchor, Don Lemon, has now been released from custody after being charged over a protest at the Immigration Enforcement Agency, ICE. The demonstration disrupted a church service in Minnesota. Lemon is accused of conspiring to deprive others of their civil rights. He insists he was covering the protests as an independent journalist. Local reporter Georgia Fort was, amongst others, arrested. Well, here's part of the UK open letter published by the digital platform Black Current News. Too often, black journalists are singled out, over-policed and obstructed from reporting, particularly when covering state power, protest, racism or injustice. Our credibility is questioned, our presence challenged, our rights treated as conditional, and our employment status is often precarious. This pattern is familiar on both sides of the Atlantic. Well, the author and professor of journalism, Afua Hirsch, is amongst the signatories.
Democracy dies in the darkness. That can sound like an empty platitude, but journalists live that reality every single day. The reason why we get out of bed every day, and why black journalists in particular do the work that we do, is to hold those in power accountable for their decisions, their choices, their values. The journalists who are being targeted in America were doing exactly that. And it's why we, as black British journalists, are unequivocally clear that we stand in solidarity with them. And why I, in particular, as a black British woman who teaches journalism in the US, have felt personally the threat to freedom of speech, to professional journalism, and to those seeking objective fact, truth-telling and accountability in America. It is a painful reality that it is not safe to be a journalist in America right now, and it is especially unsafe to be a black journalist. I hope that if any good comes out of this terrible situation, it's that it wakes people up to that reality.
Annabelle, what did you think when you heard about the arrest of Don Lemon?
Well, of course, we're still waiting for so many details of what has actually unfolded here. But my knee-jerk initial response is to be completely appalled. Of course, no journalist should be treated differently on account of the colour of their skin, and to have their integrity questioned like that is appalling. What is happening in America, I think, with ICE is horrifying all of us. And indeed, it's becoming increasingly unpopular within America. I mean, if you look at the polling, the number of people who were opposed to it last year was around 27%. Now that's risen to around 45%. The behaviour of these enforcers is so aggressive and so extreme that it is turning the American people, and you could argue they should have been opposed to mass deportations to begin with, but the approach is turning them away from it even further.
John, Don Lemon was arrested alongside Georgia Fort, a local journalist, both released pending a federal investigation. And Don Lemon's lawyers are saying that the arrests were unlawful and in breach of constitutionally protected press freedoms.
Yeah, and they're both black.
Yeah.
Trump's old man, Fred Trump, 1926, I think it was, took part in a KKK march. That's the kind of family we're dealing with. And his grandfather ran a brothel somewhere in Montana or something like this. These are
Is this all verified information that's out in the public domain?
They're both dead. So don't worry.
But still, sins of the father, though.
But Trump's old man,
Trump's old man
was accused of being of being horrible to black tenants in projects in New York, and there is a family history there which I can identify. So I find it very striking that the only two journalists who are lifted are both black, and and Dan Lemon in particular is a very, very famous figure. And you just think, you know, the Vice President, J.D. Vance, comes to Europe and lectures us about freedom of speech. And you just think, hello, what are you doing? Locking up journalists, arresting them for just doing their job. When I challenged Vladimir Putin in 2014, after the shooting down of MH17, a bit afterwards, one of the Kremlin goons came and thumped me in the stomach. Now, it was in Siberia. That's what happens in Russia. So for the Vice President of the United States to lecture Europeans and Brits about free speech, I mean, shut up and go and tend your own garden.
John, riveting. We could hear much more about your exploits, but we're going to.
Yeah, we haven't got all night.
No, we're going to move on. Coming up next, we'll take a first look at what's making the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers. Do stay with us.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Rich and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
Time now to see what's making the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers. Well, The Observer leads with the headline, "The Plot Against Democracy," as the Assisted Dying Bill struggles through the House of Lords. Dame Esther Rantzen has accused peers of not being honest. The Mail features the image of ex-royal Andrew Mountbatten Windsor posing with a mystery female as part of the Epstein files that have just been released. Lawyers for Epstein's victims have warned there is more to come. The Star also features the picture of the former royal on its front page, as does The Sun. The Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, has suggested Andrew should testify at the US Congress. The Telegraph features the photographs of Keir Starmer saying the victims have to be the first priority. That call for the shamed former prince to testify has been backed by Epstein's victims and is also on the front of The People. The Times also leading on the pressure being mounted on Andrew following the latest revelations contained in the US files. Allies of former Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner have claimed she secured £1 million to help her fund a challenge against PM Keir Starmer. Those claims on the front of the Mail. According to research by a respected think tank, 6 million UK workers would be better off financially living on benefits rather than working. That report featured on the front of The Express. So, John and Annabelle still with us to take us through the papers in this section. We're going to start off with the front page of the Daily Star. John, if you take us into this story. Not much of the story, actually, on the front page, but it's the photo that's quite arresting, isn't it?
The photo is extremely arresting. There's Andrew looking into camera, and there is a very slight young woman, or is she a girl? We don't know. Her face is blacked out, but it's a really disturbing picture. And the splash sub on the Daily Star is the Caravaggio of splash subs. He's a genius, or she's a genius, and I salute him or her. And their headline, it's the stand out the best of all the tabloids, "Creepy Crawler." Take that. Andrew, formerly known as Prince.
Annabelle?
Well, I think that what splashes of many newspapers tomorrow just show that, you know, whilst the King took this action against his brother, and he has been more out of sight, he is certainly not out of mind as well. And worse is to come. There will be more revelations, I'm sure. And the pressure on Andrew to fly to the US and face questioning under oath is only going to intensify, especially the more that we discover as files are increasingly released. So the monarchy is in a very awkward spot here. I would be very surprised if Andrew agrees to fly to America and to testify, regardless of how much pressure he may be coming under, unless there is, you know, his arm is twisted, there's some subpoena for him to do so, some legal mechanism through which he is forced, which means that this is just going to go on and on and on, despite the fact that he's been evicted from the Windsor grounds, despite the fact that he has been stripped of all of his titles in a near unprecedented move by the King. And it's become such a stain, really, on his monarchy. You know, you're talking about a king who hasn't been well. He's still receiving cancer treatment. And yet, despite what happened last year, he is still being confronted with this. And I suspect that he took some of the action that he did, and won't have done so lightly, in order to try and ensure that William, his son, doesn't experience the same when he becomes the king. But, you know, based on what we've discovered just over the last few hours, that looks unlikely.
John, how much weight do you think it brings to bear, the fact that the Prime Minister is suggesting that Andrew needs to testify, to tell what he knows, in essence? Well,
It's smart politics. But Angela Rayner did it better when she called Prince Andrew, or Andrew, formerly known as Prince, a nonce. That was a big headline. It was a bit of a story. People went, woo, 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 woo. Well, actually, I think she called it right. You may criticise me for my naughty language, but that's what Angela Rayner said. And Starmer himself, as Annabelle has been saying, has got trouble of his own because he appointed Peter Mandelson. And the Telegraph leads with Andrew must reveal all on Epstein, says Starmer. Well, what about the man he appointed to be his ambassador to Washington, D.C.? There are big questions there. And I think the Labour left, who are out for Starmer's blood, it's another thing they can hit him over the head with reason. It was silly for Mandelson to be appointed our ambassador in Washington.
Well, the Prime Minister claims that he didn't know the full story.
I know, but I phoned up Mandelson years before this and said, what about you being on Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein's Black Book? I'll get back to you, and he never did. And there were pictures that appeared, I think, in the Mail on Sunday of Mandelson palling around with Epstein after he'd been convicted of being a paedophile. It's open and shut. It was a mistake for Starmer to do this, and politically, he's going to pay for it.
I mean, I think you can see the allure of compelling these figures to testify and to get this under oath, because there's been such inconsistencies with Andrew's story in particular. Can we take actually anything that he said in 2019 to Emily Maitlis at face value? I don't believe so, because the most recent statement that we had from him was that in early December in 2010, he broke off all contact with the deceased financier. And then it emerged that on Christmas Eve or later that month, he'd been in touch with him about a possible business opportunity in Afghanistan. And the same will apply to so many other figures who are being drawn into this, whether they've committed any wrongdoing or not. And ultimately, what Keir Starmer is referencing importantly is that at the heart of this are these victims who will feel that justice delayed is justice denied, and they want those who have committed crimes against them to face the consequences, face justice, and they're not doing so. But how Keir Starmer is now going to navigate this one, having said that Andrew needs to testify, without saying the same of Peter Mandelson, who he appointed as his ambassador to the US, I just don't know.
Maybe Starmer should testify too, why I appointed Peter Mandelson. Eh?
Well, as I said previously, he didn't have the full information. This is what he tells us.
You're the nice one, aren't you?
He didn't have the full story. And when he did, he acted on it.
OK, but actually, there's enough information out there to go, don't do this, because it's a mistake. And this is, as I said, this is a sewer. And the person who is also in trouble, and the papers aren't leading with this, but Trump is in trouble because there's a lot of Trump's circle who are popping up all over the place in the Epstein files. And remember, it was Trump who said to Biden in 2020, release the Epstein files. So it's kind of like a delayed fuse bomb, which Trump lit. And now he's in power again, and it's blown up in his face. He didn't want to release this stuff, and his team has tried to redact it, but there's so much information they haven't been able to.
And I think what's really interesting is how, even if you look at the MAGA diehards, Epstein is almost the only issue where they would turn against Trump, where he would be enormously unpopular. You know, when he was flip-flopping on whether these files ought to be released or not, you could tell from some of the polling of those who'd supported him that they felt...
The Trump administration saying that these claims are baseless and false, and if there was anything truly incriminating, it would have been released already as a political weapon against Donald Trump. So that's the reason why they're saying there isn't anything.
Liar, liar, pants on fire, some say.
But not you. Should we turn to domestic politics now? And the front page of the Mail, Rayner's £1 million war chest to kick out Keir. Annabelle.
Yes, so Angela Rayner, who was out of the limelight for all of about 5 minutes after controversies surrounding her tax affairs and second and third homes, is back, and she's been making louder and louder noises recently, and it transpires that she has set up a new company called the Office of Angela Rayner with a £1 million war chest, and that is to fund her bid to try and succeed Keir Starmer. Now, we don't know when she might try to launch some kind of leadership challenge, and this is the big question mark, and it's been enormously controversial over the last few days, as whilst the Prime Minister has been in China and now Japan, the plotters have been having lots of discussions behind the scenes
while
the cat's away. Exactly. And you know, Angela Rayner is a figure who is really quite popular with Labour members who ultimately decide who the leader of the party ought to be. However, she is not popular with the wider British public, and I think one of the reasons, despite the fact that Keir Starmer's net approval rating is the lowest of any Prime Minister in recent history, one of the reasons why they haven't got those 80 MPs supporting an alternative is because there isn't an oven-ready candidate who is ready to take over, and that could potentially have been Andy Burnham, but now his path to Parliament has been blocked, and even then, had he been able to stand in a by-election, would he have been able to win? And how would he then have engineered it so that he could have made it to the top? I don't know. But at the moment, you know, there may be various discussions, campaigning going on, particularly within the Tribune group of Labour MPs. But Keir Starmer's safe for now, until May, perhaps.
I mean, do you think all of this is a little bit early, really? Because, I mean, there's not much she can do by way of, you know, a contender at this stage of play.
So Glenn Owen, the guy who wrote the story, the political editor of the Mail on Sunday, he became a journalist because, this is embarrassing but true, he met me in a bar in Croatia. And I bought all the drinks that night when it was a gap year student, and I'd forgotten completely about this. But anyway, so I think Glenn's having a punt here. I don't think it's great news. It's interesting that she's positioning, but we all know that's happening. And then they're all, you know, uneasy is he who wears the crown. I like, by the way, the other story on the front page of the Mail on Sunday, which is Monster's sex empire was honey trap bankrolled by the KGB. Ooh.
We know nothing about that, so we're going to move on and move away from that topic to the Express.
In Russian, it's nichevo. Nothing.
Which means nothing.
Yeah.
OK, nichevo.
Yeah.
I've learnt something this evening. 6 million workers better off on benefits, according to the Sunday Express. Annabelle.
Yes, this is a new research from the Centre for Social Justice think tank, which has done some really commendable work over the last couple of years, showing that you can live a life on benefits and be better off than you would if you went out to work and you were earning the minimum wage. It's all to do with the benefits that you're receiving and when you reach those cliff edges. But apparently it now applies to 6 million people. You know, it's not going especially well on the employment front in this country at the moment. You've got over 9 million people who are economically inactive. You've got rising unemployment, lower levels of employment, and nevertheless, a lot of people still getting up and going to work every day. And I think when they see a headline like this, will feel the sinking into ever greater depths of despair. Really, the idea that, you know, is there any point when they could just be signed on to benefits and be better off?
Annabelle, we must leave it there. Hold your thoughts. Hold your thoughts, John. We're going to take a break. Coming up, tempers boil over at Chelsea in the Premier League.
OK, there's a lot of firing going on. Can you explain to me why? We're journalists, eh? Let's go. Watch, wait. Right, we're going to get in. Right, get in.
We just want to ask you a few questions about your involvement with ISIS. Next step for them quite often is getting on a boat and sailing illegally over into Europe.
Es un solo procesamiento, una sola sacada.
Oh my goodness. Whoa, oh my goodness. If you weren't affected, you'd be a bit of a strange person.
Turn off the camera, turn around and go away.
Okay, but
listen, I told you 3 times.
They saw 2 guys, 2 bad people.
There's an absolutely packed dinghy.
That is what it's like. Sometimes you have to put in an awful lot of hard work. It's worth doing. I suppose it is what we do.
Turkey is burying its dead. Whole families died in this collapse. Generations wiped out. I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin. This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets. Anyone could say, I'll do that, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Liberation Day.
By popular demand, here we are.
Donald Trump. It is quite the story. Wherever it goes, on Trump 100, we go with it.
Can you tell us who you're looking for?
Unbelievable we've come to this.
Are you overstating the reach and significance of this deal?
Not like you said it.
From the UK?
Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
It was 10 feet from him, and all of a sudden the shot's running out.
People impacted.
I'll tell you on another day on the podcast what that was all about.
Join us wherever you get your podcasts.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today.
Congratulations, this is a huge moment.
But what happens now?
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is why it hasn't been stopped.
Time now to take a look at all of the very latest sports news with Mark.
Serious shout for United! Very good!
Get in there, beauty! How are the lads?
As a youngster, Alan Shearer had one ambition: to play in the black and white stripes of Newcastle United. News of his signing was confirmed by Kevin Keegan on Newcastle's current tour of Thailand.
We have signed Alan Shearer. It's a world record fee that we've paid, and we're delighted.
Fantastic, absolutely fantastic.
Most important point is a Geordie. We want to save the press conference until we go back home to Newcastle, because the signing is for the people of Newcastle.
I've got no comment to make at this stage. I'll make it later on.
You must be pleased,
thank you. Delighted. Thank you.
It was just time to come back home because I'd left 10 years earlier to go down to Southampton as a 15-year-old. It wasn't as if Newcastle were struggling. They were a club that had just thrown away that 12-point lead in the race for the title. I just had to come back home. It was my dream to play for Newcastle and score goals at the Gallagher end, and I wanted my best years ahead of me.
His hometown club have been doing brisk business in copies of the shirt Shearer will wear.
525 for his name, but we don't know if he's number 9 yet or not, but that's the number people are getting. It'll be like 725 for his name and number.
Every Geordie, like a homing pigeon, wants to come home. Alan's come home, and I think it's great for the club. And it say to the kids in the area, we're going to give you a chance.
He's coming home! He's coming home! He's coming home! Shearer's coming home!
Newcastle United, that little team in the northeast of England, do you know? We're breaking records. We're giving people hope again. The football team has such an effect on our lives.
So, John, £15 million is an awful lot of money. Will you ever get it back?
It is an awful lot of money. I wish we'd paid less, but, you know, it's the marketplace. It's the business of football.
Shearer's move from Blackburn to Newcastle beats the previous record, the £13 million that AC Milan paid for Gianluigi Lentini. And it's almost double the previous British record of £8.5 million that Liverpool paid for Stan Collymore.
Worth 15 million?
Worth 20 million to me. For the price of just one Alan Shearer, you could actually afford to buy yourself a brand new Tyne Bridge, arguably the ultimate dilemma for any Geordie. Everyone had to put personal money in, but the brewery, Newcastle Breweries, the fans could never thank Newcastle Breweries enough for what they did to the club. They brought the sponsorship deals forward and put in Scepter.
When you come to think of it, £15 million then was like this vast amount of money, a world record fee. I loved the pressure and the expectation that sort of went with that. I enjoyed it, you know. I enjoyed people looking at me, wanting or expecting or demanding that I go out and score goals.
For goodness sake, you're paying a worldwide fee for a centre-forward, England's centre-forward, and he's a Geordie.
At Blackburn, fans were returning shirts with Shearer's name on. The club, though, say they did all they could to keep him.
We are devastated for the club, the fans and the people of Blackburn, but Alan now feels it is time to move on.
Even the day he arrived, he'd always ask me, what, have Newcastle gone on when I go into the dressing room after the game. Newcastle, as we all know, were his hometown.
He rang me very early in the morning.
Let's take a look at the weather for you now.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
Well, the weather remains unsettled, which means more rain at times and the potential for flooding, where the ground is already very saturated. It's a mostly cloudy start to Sunday morning with outbreaks of rain. Where the skies stayed clear overnight, there'll be some early fog patches and it will be a touch colder than recent mornings. An area of more organised showery rain across Ireland will move eastwards across Northern Ireland into Scotland, Wales and Western England through the morning, followed by brighter skies in the west.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
Coming up on the wrap, after the latest Epstein files, the Prime Minister says former Prince Andrew should be prepared to testify in the US.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
A historic day here today.
Congratulations, this is a huge moment.
But what happens now?
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Richard and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.